Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Noble from Gold Derby, joined by the cast and crew of The Outlaws, which features Jessica Gunning, who plays Diane, Elgin James, writer, producer, Hayden Matthews, production designer, and Stephen Merchant, who does a few things on the show. He acts, he writes, he directs, he produces. I'm going to start off with you, Stephen. Who of the Outlaws crew is most like their character?
Goodness me. I mean, that feels like unanswerable, given that they are a series of offenders who've all committed crimes of one kind or another. I mean, for instance, my character is caught in a car with, I think, what we can politely describe as a lady of the night. And I've never been caught with a lady of night. I've never been with a lady of the night. Not that I've not just been caught with them. I didn't even know they existed before we made the show. So I don't know that I could confidently say anyone is like their character. No, certainly not without causing offence. Although bizarrely, the show is inspired by my mother, who used to work with community service people. She supervised offenders, and so. Jesse's character Diane does a similar job, and so my mother very proudly says, "Oh, well, you know, that's based on me." And if you've seen the show and you know kind of how absurd and how kind of laughable Jesse's character is, that's a strange boast.
Is she though? Is your mom similar to Diane?
Not at all. No. She's much more. She's much sweeter and much less pompous, and dare I say it, less funny.
Fantastic. Do they want to jump in there? Does anyone think any of the cast is like their character? Jess, you spent a lot of hours with them.
Yeah, I was trying to think who is most similar, but as Stephen said, they're all, I suppose, well, offenders to start with. But I suppose there's a little bit of everyone in each of their characters. That's why I think they're so good at playing them. But I don't think they're necessarily like their characters. I ended up starting to kind of set out chairs at one point, and I remember Gamba saying, "Oh, hello, Diane." So maybe there's a little bit of me in her somewhere. But yeah, I think like Stephen was saying, I think everyone brings a little bit of themselves, but they're so brilliantly drawn out characters. I don't think that they are necessarily like their characters. Yeah. I think.
Yeah. Elgin, as someone who sort of writes, produces the show, coming in and trying to come up with this crew, this mob, this gang of characters, what was important for you guys to focus on in creating this world and sort of characters that'll bounce off each other well?
When Steve and I, this was originally Steve's idea and Steve's baby. And when we met, we came together, it was at the same time that I'm in the States and Trump was happening here, the Trump era, if you will, and Brexit was happening in the UK. So it just was a time where you felt really divided from everybody, like your family and friends and people that you knew that, similar before this, that you loved, you may not have agreed with, but you loved, and you could, disagree. And then all that changed, became very, very just like, all of a sudden, everything felt much more murderous, I guess, if you will, and crazily. And I think it was really important for us to find something that, I mean, not that you go into something, try to make art that'll unite people, or, like that would be terrible. That would be a terrible thing if that was your goal. But naturally, I think it's what we were missing in our own lives. And I think that started to become infused in the story. We could have all these different, people from different walks of life thrown together, and find out that they have much more in common than they thought.
Yeah, I think if we had made it solely to unite people, it would have been like that Gal Gadot Imagine video.
Yeah. And Steve can't sing, so it'd have been like super
hopeless.
Awkward. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Although Christopher Walken can, we saw in the finale.
Sure.
Just get him a karaoke machine. Hayden, you had to work on the sets for this show. What was the most important thing for you to focus on in creating the world from that sort of aesthetic perspective?
I think one of the first things that I spoke to Stephen about was the fact that it was going to be set in Bristol, and that was really important to him. So I'd lived in Bristol for 8 years, and so I sort of knew the character of the city, and I knew that the characters that I was reading, how they would sit in that sort of world, and we just took Bristol and added an extra sort of 10-20% of its character.
I'd just like to expand on that, because I think, one of the things which people who aren't from the UK may not know is that Bristol is a very colourful city. It's very vivid. It's famously covered in street art. It's the sort of origin story of Banksy, among others. And so it was important to Hayden and I that we captured that. And I think one of the things that, and Hayden, you could speak to this more than me, but sort of one of the things that was very important to us was getting the community center, which is a sort of rundown derelict building that the Outlaws are renovating during the course of the show. And it was very important to us. It was a difficult location to find. We lost one location, we found another. And, and maybe Hayden, you could talk a little bit more just about, because it became such an important backdrop to the show, and it's a very vivid kind of dynamic, space, or at least you made it into that sort of space from what was a very neutral. I
think what's interesting is a lot of people have spoken to me about the show, and they're like, "Where did you find that place?" Because they literally think that's what it was like. So to explain to them that it wasn't a derelict site, it was actually quite a nice community centre that we turned into one of our characters in a way. It's interesting how people just believed it, but then the great thing that we went through the process of doing it back up again and turning it back into a proper community centre. That was an interesting idea, because it was quite boring visually when we started, so to turn it back into itself would have been visually very boring. So we had to find a new straight version of a community centre that was actually visually interesting. But it was great fun to do. Loved it.
Yeah, and you had to. It sounds like so the show is probably all done, and then you're like, guys, we haven't finished doing up the centre yet. We've got to spend another couple of weeks here. Keep the shovels, keep the paint. Was it interesting though, Hayden, for you, like, over the course of the series, the cast is meant to be working on fixing the center, but there's so many other things going on, and there's so many other things they're trying to juggle. Was it a challenge for you to know how much of like improvement to see on the site as the series went on?
I think what's really difficult about all these, the filming process, is you never do it chronologically. So there wasn't a lovely organized, let's do the community center up. It was mayhem. We were back and forwards, stick that up, take that down. But we sort of, there was a design so that we could manage that problem. But yeah, it was good.
Well, I also though, just sorry, go on. Just
I was going to say art were amazing in terms of having to dress the background, like litter was everywhere, obviously, and we were jumping from one episode to another. So sometimes they'd rush in, bring a wheelbarrow, dump the litter that was there in the other scene. So it was just a minefield trying to match everything to all the other shots. It was incredible.
But it was also the planning ahead, because as you mentioned, it sort of evolves over the course of this series, and we ended up shooting 2 seasons back to back, so it evolves even more through the shooting of the second season. But also each sort of sphere of action, we always thought of it like a prison yard, in a prison movie where there's some people over there digging a tunnel and there's some other people over there trying to stop the guards from seeing that. And so sort of you have to work out ahead of time, anything that you might need that's going to be relevant in episode 4 needs to be there from episode 1. And so it becomes a real sort of jigsaw puzzle that you're trying to plan ahead and lay all the kind of groundwork that you might need sort of down the road. So it was a real logistical headache.
Yeah, the other thing, Stephen, is when we were looking for the community centre, you were talking about different areas. And I think in the end, the scheduling problem, that having those different areas that didn't directly relate to each other really helped us, because we'd be like, we can set the front yard for episode 1. We can set the back for episode 3. So yeah, as a community center, even though it was the second one that we actually managed to tie down, it worked really well for that.
Yeah. And something else for this show, you talked about prison yard, Stephen, but and we, even though we don't see tumbleweeds and we don't see too many cowboy hats, maybe Lady Gabby in one of the episodes, I can't remember, but like it's got a real Western feel. It's called The Outlaws. You got the musical sort of chords and stuff of a great sort of Western. What influences of the Western did you guys bring into this show, Stephen?
Well, one of the things that Elgin and I liked, even from its earliest origins, it actually began as a film script, but we discovered that it was there were too many characters. It was very unwieldy as a movie. You couldn't sort of do them all justice. So as we began to sort of extrapolate it out into a TV show, there was always something fun to us about giving these very minor suburban characters, small people from small lives, giving them a sort of a grandeur that perhaps they don't quite deserve. Because classic sort of thrillers, Westerns, they are sort of epic, aren't they? And you think of them, whether it's The Godfather or whether it's The Searchers, you think of them as very grand, as you say, wide open vistas and heat hazes and people on horses. And it feels grand and epic. And we like the idea of sort of applying some of the language of that to these very small suburban lives. And so the music evokes Westerns and Sergio Leone to some point. Even the title sequence has a nod to sort of that Westerny feel, and the music, as you mentioned. And also, even just in some of the shots, we at times where we tried to play some nice big widescreen shots and give Bristol, a certain grandeur, and sort of shoot it, in a widescreen form as much as we could. As I say, as a sort of, in a way, I suppose, in part, like a slightly ironic juxtaposition between that and these small people, but also I think because everyone is the star of their own life movie, right? And so to these people who are drawn into a kind of criminal world that they're not used to, it's going to start to feel quite tense and epic and huge and life-changing. And so there's something about the idea of the style of the show reflecting that in part.
Yeah, we talked about that. Magnificent Seven was like a big influence, of course. To even like the neo like Westerns like HUD and Cool Hand Luke, you can see those fingerprints on it, I believe.
In fact, I think, am I right? I think I'm right in saying this, Elgin, that Diane's lines about, I'll allow it. It's actually what the sort of supervisor in Cool Hand Luke, the kind of merciless supervisor says in Cool Hand Luke. Like in our mind, she's watched that a lot. I think even in an early draft of the script, Elgin even wrote in the kind of mirrored sunglasses that he famously wears in Cool Hand Luke. But we decided that was maybe a step too far.
Yeah, we decided that was plagiarism, is what we decided.
That's right.
Well, Jess, and in this sort of Western sort of world that these characters create for themselves, you are the sheriff.
I know.
You're the Lone Ranger sheriff. Everybody, a lot of the inmates sort of pair up, but you're sort of the sheriff having to keep them on their toes. What was it like for you inhabiting that sort of idea of the sheriff?
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, I think that the way that Stephen and Elgin wrote Diane is so clever, because in nowhere else in her life does she have control over people like this. This is the only space where she is in charge. And boy, does she love it. But I think that exactly what you were saying, it's an epic world. And what happens during the course of season 1 and season 2 is that this is her moment, being in charge of these guys, keeping them in check. She's just living for it. So for those 4 hours or however long they're in the yard and she's in control, I think she absolutely just thrives. It's her favorite time, being in charge of that motley crew. Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine they're a tricky crew to keep on top of. Now, Jess, you're the sort of sheriff character in the show, but Stephen directs a lot of the episodes, so he's sort of the guy sort of calling the shots and trying to keep everyone in order. Jess, as someone that's in the cast when Stephen's directing, how many schemes do you guys have running behind his back?
Oh wow, schemes. I think Stephen had the hardest job of everyone, because obviously he is one of the creators of the show, writing, directing in it, and as he's often said in many cases, he's in the scene himself. So we would just watch him run back and forth to the monitor, eyes on everything. And hopefully we didn't make things too difficult by concocting schemes behind his back. But I think having him at the helm meant that everyone was at the top of their game and wanting to do the best they could. That's the thing I felt being part of the ensemble, is that even with Christopher Walken on board, we were all just wanting to do this show justice, because the script and the character and the story it felt so important to everyone. And I think that hopefully that's what comes across in the show. With Stephen at the helm, we wanted to do the best we could for him and Elgin to put what was on page and translate that onto screen, hopefully as successfully as I think it looks fab.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen, do you think Diane had a tougher job wrangling the Outlaws, or did you have a tougher job wrangling the cast?
There is no one harder to wrangle than actors. To speak frankly here, Jess is a writer herself. She can step out of the actor mindset for a second and join me on this side of the fence for a moment. Actors are your greatest asset, and at times your greatest pain in the ass. But what they bring is a sort of magic and an alchemy that, as Jess says, turns those two-dimensional words on the page into a 3, 4, 5-dimensional experience for the viewer. They are the sort of the beating heart of the show in the end. And I think to sing Jess's praises for a moment, I think one of the things she has as an actor is a very keen awareness of the production process. So as an actor, she goes over and beyond, not just in scenes that she's in, but other scenes to help. She has great ideas, creative ideas. She understands the sort of the mechanics of storytelling and of shooting, and that's a huge asset to someone like me, particularly when I'm trying to do 1,000 jobs, because you feel like you've got another pair of eyes on the scene, on kind of on spotting kind of little sort of errors, continuity errors, or even storytelling errors, and so having kind of allies like that when you've got so many hats to wear is absolutely invaluable. And again, I'm not just saying this because she's here, but I think you'll remember this, Elgin, when Jess sent her tape in, she self-taped to do Diane, and I sent it to Elgin and I said, I've no notes for this woman.
Yeah.
We sort of emailing back and forth about how giddy we were. That I've never had a tape before from any actor where I didn't have a single note for them. So I think it's just someone who understood that character and knew that it was going to be one of the great comic highlights of the series, that character, and to be able to hit it out of the park from your self-tape onwards is quite rare.
Yeah, in some ways, I think Jess and her performance, again, not just because you're on here, Jess, but let's just keep talking about you. But I think with Diane, completely encapsulates what we want to do with the show. Because you laugh with her character, you're often frustrated by her character, but you also really empathize and feel for her character as well. So it's even just in Jess's performance is exactly what we want to do with the whole entire show. So rock on, Jess, you rock. That was awesome.
Yeah. And you didn't, Stephen, catch any of the cast doing any pranks or any shenanigans or anything like that, any schemes they were concocting? Because Jess says they weren't really doing many. Do you buy it?
But you know what? I think is more common when you're filming in normal circumstances. But we were filming under COVID conditions, and it's much harder to be in the mood for pranks when at any moment you could catch a life-threatening disease. Yeah. And it's much harder to be conspiratorial when you have masks on as well. It covers your mouth. You've got to sort of pull them down. I think we should trip him over in a minute. I don't know that, it was just such an arduous process shooting under those conditions. And of course, many productions suffered. It's not just ours. But I think in a sad way, actually, I think a lot of the, when there is playfulness and pranks on set, it's because there's a good, easygoing camaraderie and a bonding. And we had that, but we had to fight hard to generate that because we were, as everyone knows, when you're filming under those conditions, you're just much harder to just relax and hang out, and you can't really go for drinks, and you can't just sort of enjoy each other's company at lunch. So it's much harder to create that kind of collegiate feel, particularly when you have a big ensemble. It's something you want to do, but it is, as I'm sure other productions have found, very hard to do in these shooting circumstances.
Did that make the moments where you were shooting and you were all together in that yard all that more important than it would even be on another show?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my point of view, I love bonding with the cast when we're filming, but obviously just because of COVID restrictions, we couldn't get physically as close as we'd like. So when we did have the opportunity to be on set in those big group scenes together, that was when we got to kind of play around and get to know each other and form that chemistry that's there in the show. I think, like Stephen said, otherwise we would have been all in Bristol for that time. We were in Bristol for nearly a year. We'd be going out for meals and getting to know each other socially. So I think that's felt strange not getting to do that. So those times on set together were even more precious. Yeah, for sure.
And Elgin, we've got these sort of big group scenes, which are pretty fun in the community center as they're building that. And it's a really fun show to see the dynamics and the way the characters bounce off each other. While at the same time, we've got sort of the Rani and Ben story bubbling away, where we see sort of the stakes and the real life or death sort of element to the show and the real danger of the show bubbling away sort of in a different storyline. And then they sort of both end up coming together. How was that sort of trying to deal with sort of almost those two different tones and worlds and how they'd play off each other?
I think that was really, I mean, when Steve and I first started talking about this, even when it was a film, and then I think even more so once it became a TV show, people had a hard time kind of wrapping their heads around it. They had a hard time even wrapping their heads around our partnership. Almost like we were an oddity. So I think it actually became, I think what they don't understand is how it was like this mold, like you couldn't separate. I think from the other people, when they think about the show, they think about like, oh, obviously Steve brought all the comedy and he must have brought all the crime element. And we have so many of the same influences. We love so many of the same things. As we always say, we hate so many of the same things. And so it became this just like real, just like hodgepodge that your fingerprints are all, all over, I think all the elements of it. And that's what's so great about writers' rooms, right? Because you have all these other brilliant people that come in and they put their fingerprints all over it. Then as Steve was saying, and then you give it to Hayden, who puts his fingerprints all over and becomes something visually. And then you give it to the actors that they just make it flesh and blood. But everything we've done is just, as he said, two-dimensional, just with words. So it really does. I mean, when you do something right, and I was here in the States, so I wasn't there for production. So I'm detached enough, not emotionally, but physically enough to be like, it was done right. Like it was executed beautifully. And I think what's great about that is at the end, you don't know where one thing starts and another thing starts. Like, where another thing ends. It all just became like everybody's.
And I think
also
also
an interesting way not to answer your question, I guess. Now I got to the end of I don't know that I answered your question, but those are just some things I felt like saying.
No, they were good, Steve.
Well, I was going to just expand on that because I think, as Elgin said, on the one hand, I think people assumed that it's sort of, as he says, a kind of an odd pairing because of our different backgrounds and also the sort of kinds of shows that we've been involved with. But I hope that sort of, as Elgin says, is kind of what's crystallized in the show is that there are high stakes, there can be drama, there can be real emotion, real pathos, violence, jeopardy, and then in the turn on suddenly some kind of goofy bit of comedy or something else. And I think as we spoke, Elgin and I, that was our experience of life, is that life does turn on a dime, and what was funny one moment can be very dark and tragic the next. And I think, trying to capture that and trying to feel like, I think some people feel like it's hard. You shouldn't really be mixing kind of crime and drama with comedy because the two sort of don't gel. But I don't know. Our experience of life is that, I mean, by way of an example, for instance, this very minor way, but I was at my grandmother's funeral. Keep it light, Steve. I was at my grandmother's funeral, and we were in the hearse heading to the sort of to the graveyard. And I could hear the driver of the hearse and the reverend who was taking the funeral. They were talking in the front cab, and the driver of the hearse said, "Reverend, do you drive?" And the reverend said, "No, I had to choose between drinking and driving, and I chose drinking." And they started laughing. And I'm thinking, my dead grandmother's in the back here. But I guess to me, it's like, why wouldn't they make a joke? It's just another day at the office for them, whereas for us, it's a big emotional moment. And I suppose, like, if you sort of pull the camera out from that scene, you've got great sadness and great kind of giggling, childlike humor, all happening in the space of one vehicle. And I think that to me it's my take on life, and I think to some degree Elgin's as well. So that's what we've tried to capture in the show.
100%.
What are people's favorite moment from the first season of the show? Hayden, do you have a favorite moment?
Favorite moment? Oh my lord!
You haven't watched them, Hayden. The man worked on this show for so many years that he doesn't want to look at it ever again.
Yeah, difficult. That's a difficult one. Difficult one. I think I have to say, I think my moments were when particular characters came together. Obviously, there's a large group of characters, but I actually really enjoyed. Strangely, you're both here, Jess and Stephen's moments. I loved it when you were trying to handcuff him coming through the.
Oh yes.
I mean that was, we shot that quite early, and I don't know how you feel, Stephen, when you start to see things come together, whether you that informs you more with a character. But for me, that relationship, I became really excited.
Yeah.
Well, indeed, and I think that it's as you say, ironically, we did about 10 days of shooting, and then, like so many other productions, we had to close down, and there was a long hiatus before we resumed. And I think even in that 10 days, we managed to get enough stuff that we began to get a flavor of the show. But much of what we'd shot was sort of some of the darker, more kind of menacing elements. So we didn't have an opportunity to sort of fully enjoy the comic flavor. So I think when we did come back and we managed to get some of those, as you say, Hayden, those early days of shooting with, some of the humor starting to come through, I think it began to make sense to all of us and to everyone involved in the production, kind of what the show was and the different tones of the show. So that's a highlight for me. For me, I think the thing that I enjoyed most was doing stuff as a director that was kind of new to me. So I think I'm quite used to working with actors, with ensembles of actors, doing comedy. But in this, I was trying to bring in, and render some of the stuff that Elgin and I had talked about a lot, which was the kind of drama, there's a foot chase, there's a kind of home invasion sequence, there's a sort of like a raid on a drug house. And so you'd be able to sort of use some of the conventions of thrillers and even heist movies, which I haven't had a chance to do before, and kind of hopefully keep that within this sort of suburban world. That was a real pleasure for me. Those are some of my favorite scenes to watch because, like I say, there's something new for me as a director.
I mean, you could watch those when it's talk about the chemistry. I'm like, Jess and Steve, you guys had crazy chemistry on screen, which is rad. I think even in Steve, you and Eleanor, I think that was really cool for me to watch that and see that chemistry happening. But I think what's really special about the show is you can take that home invasion scene and just clue into that, and that's like a sick crime thriller. And then you can go for any of the comic scenes you can give when you're trying to show him how to defend himself and put him in like a hold. You know what I mean? That's like a brilliant comedy, and it's seamless throughout. You can watch those episodes. You're not like, oh, here's the serious part, here's the funny part. It's seamless. That's what I mean. It was just executed brilliantly by you guys.
Thank you.
Do you have a favorite moment, Jess?
Yeah, similar to what Hayden was saying. I think those moments when we started to be able to kind of play about a little bit. And I suppose for my own favorite sections were when Diane, I was going to say when Diane frisks people. I really enjoyed frisking just having a lot of fun with those kind of earnest, she's taking it very seriously, and having someone like Darren Boyd, obviously deadpan, allow himself to be frisked by her just really cracked me up. The thought of in no other world would this be happening. Would she be able to have this kind of control? And then just hearing obviously Christopher Walken saying you do conduct a lot of random searches just gave me such a laugh, because the history of what is she searching for all the time, and the fact that they're just having to let her, I just love all of those bits when they just have to kind of put up with her being Diane. Yeah, fun.
But if I could just pull out something Elgin said about the seamlessness, because one of the things which I think Hayden will be slightly unsung about is because it is so seamless, is that given the fact that we started and then shut down and then resumed because of COVID, he ended up having, with almost no time or money, to recreate places we'd already sort of filmed in as sets. So what was sometimes a real kind of tiny flat in an apartment block suddenly had to be rendered on a stage and replicated exactly because we'd already shot scenes in the real place. And so any number of the sets that you see are sometimes the real location and sometimes duplicates that Hayden had to make, over the course of a weekend to be able to keep us afloat and still shooting.
Hopefully you won't be able to decide which is which.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
Yeah, I'm trying to think right now and I can't.
Great.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
No, it's seamless.
Did you? I can't remember. You said. Did you say if you had a favorite moment, Elgin?
You know what? It was I had a least favorite moment because I knew it was happening. But it's from in the story because I knew what was coming is like when they're gonna win Christopher Walken's grandson is gonna burn his money. Just as a personally, I'm just that was just like I was dreading that moment. I was dreading like the heartbreak because you know what's gonna happen. So not the execution, it was just executed that it just was like heartbreaking. And my favorite moment, this I'm Spartacus moment was really cool. Like, that was really fun to think about when everyone came up and bonded together because it felt earned. That's what we don't know. Even we're doing it as a film, it was something that we're just like, all right, we're going to be able to earn this moment. And then even as a series, you're just like, all right, are we going to be able to actually earn that these people come together in this way? And we did. So that was just like that moment. I was like, yes, we landed it. Like we stuck the landing. So I think that, it's hard to say because I feel like everyone like that. I had so many favorite moments in here, We're talking about Ted Lasso, right? We're talking about Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So many favorite moments in that show.
The money burning scene, was that such a tough moment for you because of what it said about the relationships, or just
I think about the relationship.
Okay.
Just the
not as a producer. It's like
money
get burnt is a
just literally as just knowing the heartbreak that was involved. You know what I mean? Yeah, that was it. Just knowing that story point was coming.
Wasn't there quite a complication with that, Hayden? Because you're in the UK, you're not allowed to burn money for real, not sort of officially, and you're not allowed to be seen to be burning real money. Was that what it was? It was
it's to do with the Queen's head.
Queen's face.
You can't be seen to be burning the Queen's head. So we actually, I drew some money. I drew 4 or 5 different versions of a £10 note and made them sort of more abstract every time. And then we came up with we had to go through the legal department and basically work out what they were happy for us to see. And actually, if you hold one of them up, it's a terrible note. It doesn't look anything.
So why that scene was at night.
There we are. Yeah. Right.
Very good. You have to get but the Queen, Hayden, you can confirm the Queen was not on the money that got burnt.
Queen's face was not burnt in the making of this show. No Queens were harmed in the making of this show.
Oh, very, very good. With this ensemble and bring this ensemble. Actually, Stephen, you said you directed. You'd never sort of you got to try things that you'd never tried before. What did you learn about yourself, Stephen, through making The Outlaws?
Well, I learned that it's very hard to be an actor in an ensemble show and be a director. Because there was never really much time to play things back and to check what you'd filmed. You're always kind of chasing to try and get to the next scene. And in an ensemble, when you're 6'7", as I am, you'll normally have to put yourself at the back of the scene, which means if Jess and another actor are at the front of the scene, I can't hear or see what they're doing. I'm stood in the back, pretending to shovel shit. So that was very hard. So I think as a good rule of thumb, if you are going to direct yourself in something, have it as just a show. It's much easier, like a show like The Office, where just people are sitting down at desks looking at each other. Much easier to direct that. But so that was one thing I learned was sort of either give yourself more time and money, or just don't try and do everything at once,
or just be of a sensible height. I mean, that's also
that's the other thing.
Be closer up front, right?
Yeah. Yeah, any young filmmakers who are hoping to do this, if you could try and remain a sensible height, it will really help you out.
Do you guys? Do any of you have a favorite? Oh, I might go to you, Jess, since you're on the cast here. Like, do you have a favorite group scene with everyone together? Because that was so fun.
I think the one that sprung to mind, because it was filmed inside the community centre, and I think the way that the show was lit was just so atmospheric. And it was towards the end where Diane lines them up to interrogate who hid the gun. That just felt very epic in the small world that it was in, and going down the kind of lineup of everyone. That felt like a really fun scene. And also the community centre was such a big character in the show itself. So to have that scene there as well with the smoke and the kind of lighting just felt very, very grateful. And all 7 of us were there for that. Yeah.
Does anyone here have a good Christopher Walken story?
A good Christopher Walken story.
I've got an awkward one because the first time I met him, I'm not very good at kind of small talk, and I just actually noticed, Matt, that are you wearing a tabard?
Yeah, I'm wearing a high vis.
Nice, like it.
I'm doing my service today.
Yeah.
Your community service is interviewing us at 1:30 in the morning.
Yes. Yeah, that's my community service.
Yeah, that seems like punishment enough.
Yeah.
He won't re-offend, guys. Not after this.
Not after this, yeah.
Jess is going to sign. You just need to sign me out at the end.
Yeah, I just need to make sure you do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, because obviously it's funny to see Christopher Walken in Bristol in a tabard. And when I went over and chatted to him, he's so cool. And as Stephen said in the past, he's quite quiet and just, keeps himself to himself, think quite thoughtful. And I just said, "Oh, how was your hotel?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's lovely, thanks." And there was a bit of a silence, and I was like, "Is your bed comfy?" Which he was like, "No, yeah, it is." I just couldn't think of it first day. And then I was like, "Oh, anyway, he's gonna."
You could have asked him. Yeah. Could have asked him anything about the Deer Hunter or his long film career.
All questions. Oh dear.
The great anxiety for me was the fact that, again, and not to harp on about COVID, but you have a 78-year-old icon of cinema, and he comes to your hometown. Your original plan, thinking that you'll show him around and show him the old haunts, and perhaps take him around to your family's house for a lovely Sunday lunch. And instead, of course, COVID means you can't do any of that. So all that you can do is make sure he's ferried from his hotel to the set and back again, in the hope that he doesn't catch the illness. So on set, you're just on a knife edge all the time as a director. If anyone looks like they're about to sneeze anywhere near Christopher, I jump in front of them like I'm taking a bullet for the president. And you're just, on tenterhooks worried. And at one point I looked across, we were shooting outdoors one day, and a guy, a local Bristol guy, had appeared, and Chris was having his photo taken with him. His arms around him, having a photo. And I was like, "Chris, what are you doing?" I sort of pull him away. What are you going on? Oh, he's a fan. He just bought me a bottle of Jim Beam whiskey. I'm like, do you drink Jim Beam whiskey? He's like, "No, no." I think it's just sort of a Bristolian Englishman just thought that's what Americans like. Jim Beam whiskey. He brought that round. I said, "Chris, you can't be hugging people. He could have COVID." He goes, "Oh yeah, maybe I should wash my hands." And it's like I felt like a teacher. I had to send him off. Go and wash your hands, Christopher. Goodness sake. But aside from that, miraculously, he didn't get sick, and we managed to get great stuff from him without ever sending him down.
You're just there, Stephen, going, "I'm going to get blamed for this. If he gets COVID, I'm going to be the one blamed." But Chris is going like, "Oh, but half the bottle of whiskey is full, so it's like." But no, very, very good. And it does raise the stakes as a director, trying the ever-bending risk of a cinema icon getting gravely ill. Yeah.
If every morning you walk in and you're worried that one of your leading characters might die, it's like being in a real-life Squid Game.
Right.
You never know who's going next. It's terrifying.
Oh boy. I get does anyone could tease us with anything for season 2 without spoiling anything? We don't want to spoil it, but season 2.
Well, there was an old writing adage that I got taught years ago, which was, with kind of good writing and good comedy and good drama, is you chase your characters up a tree and then you throw rocks at them. And I felt like in series 1, we chased them up the tree, and in series 2, we're throwing rocks at them. And, we did not sort of magically allow all of the problems that had arisen in series 1 disappear. We made sure that all those problems came back to haunt them. And so, in a sense, the second series picks up very quickly after the first, and all of the kind of stew of problems that they've created for themselves is just going to come back to haunt them, and we sort of turn the heat up. And so I think that's the pleasure of the second series. And I think also, like with any good second series, you set up the world, you set up the characters, the audience knows both, it's familiar. So now you can sort of have fun in a way, and you're not sort of so beholden to setting up the universe of characters. So I think that's the real, I think, pleasure of series 2.
Yeah. Wait till series 3, we set the tree on fire.
That's right. That's right.
Season 4, Hayden's going to bring a wood chipper in.
Right, that's right.
Very good. I like to do this sometimes. Could everyone just say one word they would use to describe the Outlaws? If you have to encapsulate the series in one word, what word would you use? Hayden.
Oh my gosh.
I'm bad with one words. I'd come back to me at the end.
We'll come back to you at the end. Jess.
Oh no. One word. Payback.
Payback. Elgin.
Dynamic is what came to my mind. Is that
okay?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Dynamic's a word we'll allow. Well, Stephen.
I think my word is
I'm gonna pop in here.
Hayden's got one. There you go.
Mayhem.
Mayhem.
yeah.
Great. Nice.
Can I change my word? I want to change my word. I'm going to say mayhem.
Okay. Well, okay. Oh, you're changing his word. Okay. Stephen.
I think my word is optimistic.
Oh, nice.
'Cause that's what I hope the show is ultimately, optimistic about people and human connections, and that we can actually, as Elgin said earlier, find common ground. And I think, sometimes it seems like a trite idea, but it's worth reminding ourselves every so often.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I did a rubbish one. Payback.
Yeah, no, we've done your word. I just think, Jess, can we? Have I done my time? Can we wrap things now, or
I think you clocked it. I'll just check. Yes.
Thank you. Jed, you caught on a generous mood today. That's very good. Thank you so much for talking with us, everyone. Yeah, thanks everyone for talking with us. Stephen, I was watching an episode with my grandma this week, and she said about Greg. She said he doesn't need to say anything. He's just funny. So there you go.
That means that she thinks I look funny, which is a real
So thank you. Everyone watching this interview can go to goldderby.com to make your awards predictions and watch other awards coverage. And guys, all the best of luck with the Emmy Awards for your consideration, all categories, all eligible categories, The Outlaws. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much,
guys.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks.